At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
You don't need to be a therapist to make a positive impact on someone's mental health. You just need to be there to attune to them, to make them feel important, to make them feel seen and known and missed. So it's really in mattering that we can deliver this kind of social health that then delivers mental health for people.
That was Jennifer Wallace on Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, author of Act for Burnout and Act Daily Journal.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and the author of an upcoming book on developing your confidence and social skills.
From Boston, I'm Dr. Yael Schoenbrunn, faculty at Brown University and author of Work, Parent, Thrive, and an upcoming book about misunderstanding.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Want to level up your podcast feed in the new year? If you love Psychologists Off the Clock, you need the Behavioral Grooves podcast. Great behavioral science, real-world applications, fun co-host conversations, and insights that actually improve your work and home life. Find Behavioral Grooves wherever you get your podcasts. I'm here today with Jennifer Wallace, an award-winning journalist and author of the New York Times bestselling book, Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What We Can Do About It, which was named an Amazon Best Book of the Year and for which she joined us on Psychologists Off the Clock in episode 324. Jenny is also founder of the Mattering Institute, whose mission is to create cultures of mattering in workplaces and communities, and co-founder of the Mattering Movement, a nonprofit dedicated to creating cultures of mattering in schools. Jenny started her journalism career at CBS's 60 Minutes. She's contributed to the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. And she's here with me today to talk about her new book, Mattering: The Secret to a Life of Deep Connection and Purpose. Welcome, Jenny.
Oh, I'm so glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. I wanted to start before we dive in to talk a little bit about your journey from writing Never Enough to writing Mattering. So your first book explored toxic achievement culture and how it crushes kids. How did writing that book lead to this book?
Right. So it's interesting. I wish I had written this book on mattering first, to be honest. I wish I'd known about mattering when I was first starting the Never Enough research. But it was about 2 years into my 4 years researching Never Enough when I discovered that the kids who were doing well despite the pressure felt like they mattered for who they were deep at their core, away from their achievements and successes. And what I kept hearing over and over again from the parents of these young people was that they felt like they didn't matter, whether they were working in major hospitals as doctors, feeling crushed by insurance companies. One doctor told me she felt that she was being killed death by 1,000 clicks because she has to have so much time on her computer and not looking at her patients in order to abide by regulations and insurance companies' wants. I spoke with people in finance who felt like they were totally replaceable at work. They were made to feel replaceable. Some of them felt invisible. And so I kept hearing these stories over and over again, people feeling like they didn't know their neighbors, that their friendships felt hollow, even their relationships with their partners wasn't nourishing and nurturing. And so I wanted to find out what the research says about young people's resilience. And what I found is that if we really want to make a dent in the youth mental health crisis, we need to go upstream and take care of the adults in their lives. And so that's what this book is. It's an effort to help adults, caregivers in particular, feel a sense of mattering in their day-to-day life, because in my mind, mattering really is resilience, mattering to the people in our lives, mattering in our work, whether it's paid or volunteer, just feeling like we matter in our daily lives is so critical for well-being. And it's something we don't talk about.
I think many people are familiar with the research that suggests that having a sense of belonging is really a core human need. And I feel like mattering is that. It's sort of like what we need to do so that we have a sense of belonging. But I wonder if you can share what your definition of mattering is. Like, what are the ingredients?
Yes. So researchers describe it as feeling valued and having an opportunity to add value. And what I think is so great about mattering is that, like you mentioned, it encompasses feelings like belonging and connection, but I think it goes deeper. So you can belong to the accounting department or your neighborhood or a classroom, but not feel like you matter to the people there. You could have a deep sense of purpose, but if you don't see that your actions are actually making an impact, you can burn out. You can disengage. So to me, mattering is this meta need that sits above all the other needs. And it just takes the things that we know we need and it drives them deeper.
You have so many great stories in your book. And one of them that really stayed with me is the story of the firefighters. You talked about how this one firefighter helped a girl get to the hospital, but then never got to find out what happened with her. And there's this sense of like, we can have a sense of purpose, but if we just feel disconnected from the outcome, it makes that mattering harder to access. It's not just about having meaningful, purposeful work, but it's about being connected to it in a particular way.
So I don't know if you know this. I didn't know it before researching the book, but firefighters are often the first to arrive at the scene of a medical emergency or an accident. The firefighter story that you're talking about is a firefighter who was called to a drug den because a young girl was shot in the stomach and her intestines were coming out. And so he put his hand on her and held her and soothed her in the ambulance all the way to the emergency room. And then the EMS and the hospital took over and he never knew what happened next. He never knew if she survived. And it actually really made a lasting impact on him and hurt his mental health. The fire chief in that story, the reason I tell that story is this is a fire station in North Charleston, South Carolina. And the fire chief knew that was causing firefighters to disengage, to burn out, to not be connected to your impact. So he created a system that would track the outcomes of rescues because he wanted his firefighters to know when their actions had saved a life or eased someone's suffering, because he knew it's not enough to do important, purposeful work. You need to know your actions make a difference. You need to know you matter. And it got me to thinking how so many of us in all different walks of life so often feel disconnected from our impact. I'm a writer. I sit for hours at my computer hoping that the words will resonate. A parent raising a child, not knowing if all of their sacrifices, the advice they're giving, all of these things, if they're making an impact. The parenting is such a long game. It takes a long time to really know if your efforts made a difference. But what I started understanding and talking with people about this is that there are ways every day that we can connect in small ways to our impact. Ever since researching this book, I'm not great at journaling. I know, so good to journal, I just don't have the energy. So I've created this 2-question little journal prompt that takes 30 seconds that you could keep a little book next to your bed and ask yourself 2 questions every night before you go to bed. Who made you feel valued? And where did you add value? I remember there was one day when I was working 12 hours writing my book, so I wasn't really adding value anywhere. And I was driving to the supermarket and I let somebody else get this primo parking spot that was really mine. But I saw the look of disappointment on their face when they saw that it was my spot. And so I just waved to them and I let them take it. And that was a little way that I added value that day. Just these small little moments, days when I'm totally disconnected from my impact. I will do things like that. I will let, strangers merge into traffic in front of me. I will do these little small tasks that remind me that my life makes a difference, even in small ways.
It's like finding the mattering in the mundane.
Mattering in the mundane. I love that. I'm going to write that down. And it is because I think too much is expected of us today. We have too much input and too much output demanded of us. And so often we go through our days in this kind of autopilot just to get through it, right? Just to do what we need to do. And what mattering does is that it forces you to wake up and notice your actions, how you're impacting other people, and the impact that other people have on you. So it's not just making people feel like they matter. It's also noticing if you're doing something unintentionally that's making people feel like they don't matter, right? Are you so busy at work that you don't even say hello to some of the colleagues that you pass in the hall? Are you so consumed in the lunch line that you don't thank and make eye contact with the person serving you the warm meal? All of these little things that remind us that we matter. These I call them in the book little social proof. The social proof. We're denying each other that because we are so busy and we are going through life on autopilot.
Yeah, it's like a mindfulness practice to pause and notice. But I do want to bring up something from what you just said, which is this mattering framework also helps us understand why things like people being rude or dismissive of us sting so much, because it really impinges on our sense of mattering. Like if you're going to treat me as if I don't matter, I'm going to feel that deeply.
Yes. What I love about learning about mattering is that instead of personalizing, so I'll give you an example. This happened years ago and I still think about it. I was at a cocktail party with my husband, one of his work cocktail parties, and someone who was more senior was, saying, "How are you?" talking to me, and then pulled out his phone and was texting somebody while he was talking to me. It has stuck with me, that moment of incivility, rudeness. What was it? And I wondered why it was so sticky to me. And then as I was studying mattering, I said, "Oh, because he made me feel like I didn't matter. I didn't matter more than sending a random text." Yes, I understand that sometimes you have like little emergencies. So the nicer thing would be to preserve someone's sense of mattering is, "I am so sorry. I just have to send my child this quick text because they are waiting for me," just to let people know that you recognize them, that you see them, that they are important enough for you to value them.
Absolutely. And I think I actually did a newsletter not that long ago with Jackie Nessie, who studies mental health and technology use. And we talked about this portmanteau called phubbing, when phone snubbing. And it's exactly what you're talking about. And it really is painful because we feel snubbed. And exactly the mattering framework explains it. We're getting the message that we don't matter very much. And it really hurts.
Here's one of the things that I love about mattering, that moments like these, when you know that these are moments that are making you feel like you don't matter, it gives you a way of kind of zooming out a bit and making it less personal and putting it more into context. You could be more curious about it rather than hurt. Like I think about, one of the ways that our mattering really takes a hit is through life transitions. And I wish I had known this, right? When my husband and I were newly married, we moved to London and I left friendships of 20 years. I left my work, full-time work. I was freelancing in London. I was moving into a neighborhood where no one knew me. And I was so lonely. And I was embarrassed to feel so lonely, that I'm this grown woman who should not be so lonely. You're married, you have friends. But I wish I had known that I didn't have to feel ashamed of that was just that my mattering had taken a hit. And it would have given me a path forward. I would have said, "Oh, I know why I'm feeling this way, because I don't feel valued. No one here knows me. I'm not adding value. I don't have a job where I can see my impact on a daily basis." And so there would have been small things I could have done to bolster my sense of mattering. I think that would have made that transition easier.
Yeah. And it gives you this idea of like, okay, if I'm not getting mattering in this context, in this role, in this pocket, and that's clearly something that I need to get on a regular basis to feel that sense of, belonging and value, then we can sort of be more deliberate about finding places, small and large, to be cultivating that. I wanted to transition into asking a question. So you have this very beautiful epilogue that's so touching about your father and how you lost him during the writing of this book. And it was so moving. And you write that, throughout his life, he helped you to feel like you mattered, and that this really provided you with an early and sort of longstanding anchor. And I wonder if you can talk about how that foundation shapes our capacity to navigate life and to help others feel like they matter.
So I didn't realize how lucky I was to be raised by two parents who really made a point of making me feel valued. And they did it in the day-to-day, that every single day after work, my dad and I would play sports on the front lawn. We would play catch. And every weekend, it would be spent doing family activities, often driving me to debate tournaments or things like that. I felt he was very attuned to me, which is really a gift. My parents, I think, instinctually knew that parenting wasn't about the parent. It was about each child. And my sister and I had very different temperaments, and they were able to parent for the temperament that they had in front of them. And my father didn't just make me feel like I mattered. He was deliberate about how he made others feel like they mattered. In his eulogy, I talked about how in his presence, you felt like you mattered, whether you were his grandchild or you were the guy wrapping the order at the deli, that you felt known. I tell this story in the book about how when my dad retired, he would spend once a week at this casual restaurant getting a burrito. He loved a burrito. Once a week, he would go to this restaurant and he got to know everybody. And he was a very friendly, not a big personality, a gentle guy, very much a gentle soul. But he took a real interest in people. And he had to stop going for a few weeks because his mother-in-law, my grandmother, was dying. And so he was there to support my mother. And then when he finally returned, the people said, "We've missed you, Pat. What's going on?" He explained what happened. The next week he arrived and everyone had written a note of condolence on a card to him. And I just remember him showing it to me. And he was just so amazed and so touched that these people, many of whom were going to, college, part-time, some have kids, trying to juggle a job and all these things, that they took the time to go buy a card and write in it for him. He was so touched, but his absence showed them how much he mattered to them. And they wanted to express it.
Well, and I have to wonder if there's just something reciprocal about mattering, that when we let other people know that they add value to our lives, that they're much more likely to let us know how much they value us.
That's right. And I think we see that in the research on gratitude with couples, that it takes one person in a couple to really start this upward spiral of expressing gratitude, is telling people how much they matter. And what I have found in my own life since practicing mattering is that when you start doing that, when you start modeling that, people want to reciprocate. They want you to feel it back because it's such a warm, wonderful gift.
Yeah.
And you want to give it back to the people who give it to you.
So as a psychologist who is in private practice, I see lots of people who didn't grow up with that beautiful anchor of having that regular, persistent, enduring experience of mattering. So they were raised by caregivers who were emotionally unavailable or dismissive. And there's a psychologist whose work I love, Lindsay Gibson, who writes about emotionally immature parents. These are parents who, whether through their own limitations or circumstances, really left their children feeling fundamentally like they didn't matter. And so for somebody starting from that place of not really having that experience, where do you recommend that people begin?
Yeah, it's very hard. I'm a huge fan of therapy. You as a therapist, I'm sure, would agree with me, to be able to unpack those messages. And perhaps if you can have a little compassion for your parents who didn't have the tools. I often think that people don't feed other people's mattering because they don't have the tools to do it. And so if there's a way to dig down and feel compassion, that's a start. I think in our self-help culture, we like to tell people to focus on yourself, look inward, optimize yourself, build back your sense of mattering on your own. It's not how mattering works. Mattering is really a social idea. And so what I would say is to find people in your life that you can trust. And you don't need a lot, one or two, that you can open up to about how you're feeling and who can reinforce that sense of mattering. We do, as humans, crave the social proof that we matter to others. So I would say start by finding one or two people in your life that you feel like you can trust and start talking to them and start bringing them into your life. Let yourself send that signal to yourself that you are worthy of that kindness and support. At the same time, I do think you could also be building up this idea of mattering to yourself. So what does it mean to matter to yourself? It means that your needs, and I think this is particularly hard, it certainly was for me, for caregivers, it is the idea that you are worthy of also having your needs met. So yes, we as caregivers matter too much, you might say. There are so many people's needs that we need to meet. And so a small practice that I've started doing since researching mattering is waking up every morning and saying, what is one small need that I need to fill today for myself so that I can show up as my best self? And so give yourself that gift. It's very personal what it is. It could be having a cup of tea in quiet, not answering emails or other people's texts and dealing with everyone else's agenda. It could be there's a woman I interview in the book who goes for a 1-hour walk every day. And she said, rain, snow, doesn't matter. She needs that walk. It's a walking meditation for her. For others, it might be chatting on the phone with a friend. Whatever it is that feeds your own sense of mattering to yourself, make a point to do that every day. And then the second part of that, because I said we're social beings, is to find one or two people who you can open up with, who can remind you of your worth when you sometimes inevitably take a hit.
I love those tips. And you do such a great job in your book of talking about the social health crisis and how mattering kind of fits into it. And I think that there is just a very practical problem because mattering is so relational and we are such relational beings. And we're living in this world where distance and sort of being on our own and delegating, you could live your work life and your home life being pretty disengaged. And yet we need that social engagement. And so part of what makes this social health crisis and accessing mattering so difficult is the challenge of getting socially engaged.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we live in a world, even before tech came on the scene, we were already becoming very individualistic. There's lots of documentation from Robert Putnam and others about bowling alone, how we used to belong to religion. We used to belong to bowling leagues, to 4-H clubs. There were natural ecosystems of mattering.
Even spiritual life, most people had much more engagement with their religious communities. And I think that's not as much a part of most people's modern lives.
That's right. We are much more individualistic than we've ever been. And we are really denying that social aspect of ourselves. And that is really the root of our mental health crisis. We talk so much about a mental health crisis like it's this individual thing. Really what it is a social health crisis that's causing a mental health crisis. So religion, while it isn't perfect and a panacea for everything, it did offer us an ecosystem of mattering. Almost every major religion talks about unconditional worth, that you are worthy just because you are a child of God. We don't have that today. We have replaced religion with capitalism. And so the person who's most worthy is the one that's participating and adding value to the capitalistic system. So children aren't valued. Older people aren't valued. The people who are not working aren't valued. Our worth as a society has become very, very conditional. Tech has exacerbated that. It has magnified it. It's accelerated the sense of loneliness and isolation that we're feeling. Tech companies, their main objective is this idea of frictionlessness. So this idea that everything should be easy. You should be able to just click a button and get your groceries. Click a button, get your food delivered to your door. Click a button. So we have almost lost a kind of tolerance for friction. And I think that is a part of why people are pulling away from friendships. They are disengaging from family members that cause them friction. I'm not saying that in some cases that's healthy and you should be doing it, but I think we've oversimplified what good relationships, healthy relationships really look like, and they involve friction. Humans involve friction. And it's in the friction that we find meaning. And it's in the friction that we can access the mattering.
My mind is going in a couple different directions, but I wanted to say two things. So one is at the friction that our technology and the landscape of the modern working world, as well as our social world, it gives us a lot of freedom. And you have this line in your book that I think is so spot on, that too much freedom without meaningful responsibility leaves us hollow. And it reminds me of like one of the earliest social psychology studies by Emil Durkheim, where he collected data across Europe and looked at predictors of suicide risk. And what he found was it was the folks who had more obligations that had lower risk. And so we have this idea of the benefit of being freed from all of the demands and obligations. But, and it's not to say that there are, we don't want to be overwhelmed and stressed out. That's also not good for us. But having a sense of like, if I don't show up, that person will be disappointed because I matter to them is a good thing.
It is. It's one of the critical ingredients to mattering, right? I think about the ingredients to mattering in a framework. I call it the SAID framework, SAID, feeling significant, feeling appreciated, feeling invested in, and feeling depended on. And I interviewed a gentleman who said to me, one of the hardest parts about aging is that people stop depending on you. They don't feel like they should depend on you. And boy, everyone needs to feel that sense of dependence. Somebody was telling me a story about a girl who was really struggling with school refusal. And the school had a very clever way of handling it. They asked her if she wouldn't mind playing an important role in the school that they're just rolling out, to be the inaugural greeter. And so they gave her a badge and they told her she had to be there 15 minutes early in case anybody came to school to meet with a teacher early. So it was really important that she be there at the door to greet people. And she did. She didn't miss another day of school. She was depended on. She was relied on by the school to greet people. She had a job to do. So it's something that we, in our individualistic culture, we herald the idea of self-reliance. We praise the self-reliant person. We don't need any help. I used to be one of these people. I used to want people to lean on me, ask me for advice, me help them. And I didn't want to burden my friends. And what I have figured out in this research on mattering is that when I don't reach out for help, not only do I deny myself the help I need and deserve, I also deny my friend the chance of being a helper, of being someone I depend on and rely on, because that is how I signal how much they matter to me. So if you're struggling and thinking about not reaching out for help, I hope you'll think of this, that asking for help isn't weak. It is actually an act of generosity. You are telling someone they matter.
Yeah, it's so powerful if somebody does something that matters to you to let them know. Like that's the gift, is like, let them know that was amazing. That made such a positive difference. And then the other thing, and this kind of goes back to what you had been saying before, which is that relationships have friction. We get anxious that engaging with friends, partners, family members is going to be friction filled. And it might be, because that's kind of the nature of relationships. And you talk in your book about this pocket of research that people will probably be familiar with, of the still face experiment. So there's a really great book for folks who are interested called The Power of Discord, that's written by the lead investigator of the still face research at Tronic and also a pediatrician, Claudia Gold. And it's terrific. It's called The Power of Discord. And what he says is that people often misunderstand his research of like that the disengagement, the disattunement that a caregiver has from her child is distressing. Absolutely. Like we want to be tuned into, but that the power of relationships is that there's always going to be moments of discord and then moments of reattunement. That's where the growth happens. That's where the deepening happens. That's where the learning happens. That's where like the connection and the being known and the mattering gets built. And so if we avoid it because we're afraid of the friction, we're going to miss out on opportunities to matter and to feel other people's impact and care for us.
That's such a great point. It is the idea that relationships get stronger in the repair.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that you can have some friction with someone and you can come out the other side. And that is what makes you know that this is a long-term, sturdy friendship. This is a relationship worth building because you can repair it should there be friction that you need to get through. One of the things you said earlier was when you do reach out for help and somebody does help you, to let them know, to close the loop. We are so busy in our worlds that we forget to close the loop. A friend offers advice and you take it and something great happens and you forget to say, I took your advice. Here's what happened. Wow, it was amazing. Or thank you for introducing me to that person. She and I are now great friends, and it's all because of your introduction. You are so generous with your friends. So that is part of mattering, is this idea of appreciating someone, but not just appreciating the deed, appreciate the doer. So that's how we feed the sense of mattering. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're sick and your friend brings you over a pot of soup. You can say to your friend, thank you so much for this delicious soup. Oh, it really helped me. That's very pleasant. It's appreciating them. But a way to feed their sense of mattering is to say something that addresses them, who they are at their core. So it's thank you so much for making this soup for me. You somehow always know what I need, even before I know what I need. You are such a deep, generous friend, and I am so grateful to have you in my life. So the difference there is thanking them not just for the deed, but for being the kind of person that does things like this.
It reminds me a lot of parenting advice that, we're encouraged to reinforce and amplify the effort, not the outcome. And it's the same thing. Like, can you sort of reinforce the person who is doing the thing, not the outcome of the thing? And that really does help people to grow into themselves and to really recognize who I am at my core matters, not just the thing I do.
Yes, and that's part of my identity. It's why in the research on chores for kids, researchers suggest if a child is helping to thank them for being a helper instead of thanking them for the help, because that is how we sort of sew in as they're building their sense of identity that they are someone who helps. That's a part of who they are, and we appreciate that about them.
Well, so I have an interesting clinical challenge, and I'm curious if you have thoughts on it. But there are some people who seem convinced that other people don't think that they matter and yet dismiss signs that they do. For instance, you might go to visit your mother for her birthday and she spends the whole visit complaining that people never take time out of their day to take care of her. And I'm curious, do you have a sense psychologically of what's happening when somebody sort of can't take in evidence that they matter, and how those of us around people who are unreceptive to getting that reinforcement of mattering can help them to become more receptive?
That's a tough question. What I think about is that there are some people who have a bottomless well of needing to matter, this narcissism of needing to matter and it never really getting met. What's difficult about mattering is that it's a felt experience, right? So it's not necessarily the evidence that you matter. It is the feeling that you matter. It is the felt experience. So you can't tell someone to feel like they matter. They have to actually go through it and feel it. And so it's frustrating. I would say we make people feel like they matter, not because they always reciprocate or because they always get it, but because we're somebody who wants to reinforce that in people. So I would say keep doing it because it's who you are. You're somebody who wants to tell people why they matter. But unfortunately, you can't force someone to feel like they matter. Now, here's the other thing I would say that, the love languages, I know that they're not scientific necessarily, but I do think they give you a window in to what makes someone feel like they matter. This idea of really attuning to the person that you're with. So for years, literally for years, I thought I was making my husband feel like he mattered by organizing his closet, which was always a mess. And he never really appreciated it. And one day I said to him, you don't appreciate that I do your closet. He's like, I don't. I'd rather you just tell me, something good, a word of affirmation, as opposed to this action. And the way that I feel like I matter is when people invest in me, when they do things like organize my closet, for example. Those kind of acts of service are how I feel like I matter most. So I do wonder if the mother that you're talking about, if the patient or the child is not attuning to what makes the mother feel like she matters. And you might even ask her, when do you feel like you matter the most? Is it when someone does something for you? Is it when people say things about you? what are the moments that make you feel like you matter most? So my advice would be to really try to tune in and get curious and make it like a scientific investigation. Be an emotion scientist here.
Yeah. Well, I love that advice as a psychologist. And I also love the recognition and you naming that mattering is an internal experience that, like any emotion or internal experience, we can't force someone to have. We can only help to cultivate the environmental conditions where it's more likely to happen. And so we can do our part, but ultimately we don't get to determine in some sort of a forced way whether somebody else is going to have that experience. And you just provided a nice segue into talking about attunement. I wonder if you can share what is attunement and why does it matter for mattering?
Yeah. So the way I speak about attunement in the book is the idea of tuning into someone's emotional state and then acting accordingly. So it's not just the act of attuning to someone. It's not just saying, wow, you seem down, but actually responding in a way that supports them. So attunement would be when a partner comes in from work and you could definitely see something's wrong and you say, everything okay? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. And you say, no, really, what happened? Did that conversation with your boss not go the way you hoped? And in that moment, your partner may feel felt, right? That you have noticed, you have tuned into what they are feeling. Now, another partner might say, I really don't want to talk about it. And responding in that way, not saying, no, come on, you have to tell me. No, I'm your partner. I want to know. That's not attuning to someone. Attuning to someone is seeing what their emotional state is and trying to act accordingly in a way that is supportive to them, either with visible or invisible support. So visible support would be words, helping them think through a problem. Invisible support could be you have the husband who really doesn't want to talk about it, so you make their favorite meal, or you put on the show that you know they love and you watch it together. You cuddle on the couch. You do small things that let them know that you're there to support them, even in small ways.
I mean, it kind of brings me back to what you said about your parents, that they were remarkable at being able to meet you and your sister's differing needs, that they were able to kind of tune in, like Jenny is this way and her sister is that way. And so I need to show up in this way when Jenny's feeling sad and that way when her sister feels sad. And the ability to do that is not that easy, right? I think a lot of people really struggle with it. And you interviewed a lot of people in this book who are clearly exceptionally good at helping others to feel their attunement. And what did you learn about what their skill set is?
Well, they're very aware. They are aware of the people around them. I'll tell you, the woman, and she didn't make it into the book because I had to cut a lot so that it would be a shorter book. I wanted people to really be able to read through it.
It is. It's a very digestible book, but there's so many good stories.
Oh, thank you so much. So there was a woman that didn't make it into the book who I think was masterful at attunement. And she worked as a bartender in a Delta lounge. And I just sat at a table and watched her for 30 minutes. And she was able to read every single person who walked up to the bar. Were they someone that wanted engagement, her to talk to them? Were they someone who just wanted to be left alone, treated with like a gentle? And so she had this great skill of being hyper aware of the people around her, having a sense, tuning into their emotional state. So noticing if they're stressed, looking at the signs, the sort of outward signs that they were displaying. Did they look disheveled? Did they look exhausted? Did they look energized? Did they look like they were celebrating something? And she matched her energy to them. So she met them where they were and then responded in kind. So the people that are really good at this are people who are really aware.
Yeah. It's like aware and then behaviorally flexible, like willing to kind of adjust and meet people, as you said, where they're at, not insisting that people sort of come over to their side emotionally or behaviorally. And I think there are some people that are really, really good at that. And I think it's something that each of us, all of us, and all of the listeners can practice to do more of, because there is something so powerful when somebody sort of detects that you're feeling away and sort of responds in a way that is helpful for you. It just feels so loving.
And I think it's what makes people feel so close. I think it's Dan Siegel who talks about attunement as the feeling of feeling felt. That makes us feel like people really get us. We feel really known. We feel seen. We feel significant when people take the time to attune to us. And that is rarer and rarer today. People are busy. People are overwhelmed. People are looking at their phones. People are trying to get through the to-do list. So this attunement does take time. And it also takes being in person, because you can tune into somebody over a screen, but it's much harder. And you're not getting all of the cues that you would in person. So it takes us getting off of our couch and going out into the real world.
So let me ask one more question related to that, which is this idea of physical spaces as mattering nudges, which I love that you talk about, because I really do think that this is a huge problem in our modern world. I wonder if you can share the pub therapy story that you line up in your book, because it's such a cool one. Like, I love the idea of pub therapy.
I know. I love the idea of pub therapy. So for this book, I traveled around the world to different countries to see what they were doing in bolstering people's sense of mattering. And a researcher told me to go to this pub in London where the manager and also the woman who was in charge of special events were both very plugged in to creating this intentional space of community and mattering. So the special events woman's name is Becky, and she had studied to be a therapist, a child therapist. And she had this epiphany one day that, yes, she could see several clients a week, but she could do probably more work, reach more people, have greater impact working in a pub where she had worked earlier and creating this ecosystem for everyone in the pub to feel known, to feel important, to feel invested in, dependent on, all of these elements of mattering. And I have to tell you, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary to watch. What I have come to realize is, sociologists have been talking about third places for many years. The idea that the home is the first place, work is the second place, and we have third places in our lives, things like libraries, pubs, hair salons, cafes, restaurants that we frequent. Think of Cheers if you're right? Where everybody knows your name, where you feel important. And so this pub was very intentional in letting people feel important. And I just want to underscore that to make someone feel important is not to throw them a surprise party or toast them every day. Mattering, the sense of importance is in the details. It's feeling like you are prioritized in someone's mind, that they remember your favorite drink, or they remember how you like your tea, or they include you in a bridge game, or if you're missing from the bridge club. So Becky created all of these different clubs and activities, game nights, bridge, toddler dancing support groups for moms. It was really like a community center that took place in a pub. And many of the people didn't even drink. It was, pubs in London are not just about alcohol. They're really like a meeting place. Pub stands for public house. It is your public house in England. And so it was extraordinary to watch. And what I learned from Becky is that you don't need to be a therapist to make a positive impact on someone's mental health. You just need to be there to attune to them, to make them feel important, to make them feel seen and known and missed. So it's really in mattering that we can deliver this kind of social health that then delivers mental health for people. So for Becky, the story of the pub really was this upstream effect. Where can we create these ecosystems that no longer really exist for people? How can we be intentional about the places we already go to and how to make them into mattering spaces?
I love it so much. And it's so actionable. And then it has this self-perpetuating effect, because then you feel like you're making a difference for other people. They in turn are going to want to make a difference for you. And it has so much power. I feel like the world kind of feels dark, but there are things we can do to sort of increase the light and increase the connection and the warmth. And I really, such huge thanks for this book and bringing the concept of mattering to so many. So I'm excited for this to get out into the world.
Thank you so much. I would love to say to somebody, if you're feeling like you don't matter right now and wondering what you can do, I would love to let people know that you have agency in your sense of mattering. So it could be as little as sending a text to someone that you're close to that says, if it wasn't for you, ... I wouldn't have gone for that job interview. You always make me feel courageous. Thank you for lending me your courage and supporting me and believing in me, even when I don't necessarily believe in myself. So just a small text, or if you don't have somebody in your life that you feel like you can be that open with, just walk out your door, go to the drugstore, and thank the man or woman who always greets you with a smile and say, the days have been hard, but I have to say, you are such a light in the world. I hope you know the warmth you bring and how you change people's day. Just these little moments. Our world is so starved for mattering. There is no one walking on this earth right now whose mattering is filled up to the cup. Everyone has a deficit, some more than most. And so just know that the fastest way to feel like you matter again is to remind someone else why they do.
What a perfect place to end. And for listeners who want to find out more about you and your work, where can they go to find that content?
Oh, thank you. So the book, you can order the book. You could head over to my website, jenniferbwallace.com. I have a newsletter where I give advice on mattering, and my Instagram, Jennifer Wallace, for more mattering tips.
And we'll link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Jenny. This was such a treat.
Oh, thanks for having me on again.
Welcome to the co-host post. I'm here with Emily to talk about mattering, this conversation that I had with Jenny Wallace. Hopefully you all can tell I'm a huge fan of her writing. And this idea of mattering, I think, is just so widely applicable and easy to wrap your head around, which I think makes it a very friendly and useful concept. Emily, what did you think as you were listening to this episode?
There were so many great nuggets to pull out of this. And of course, as the parenting person, I loved the focus on let's take care of the adults and the caregivers of children to help children be better and live better. But what I found really fascinating was the whole discussion around the importance of friction and how we've gotten to a place in our modern world where there's this impulse to avoid friction, and that friction is bad or a sign of problems. And so we don't engage with friction. But then what happens is we lose connection and closeness, and there's this ripple effect. And what I thought of was what's going on right now with AI and chatbot relationships. And what concerns me as a psychologist is that in these relationships, it's all about the chatbot making the person feel good. And there's no friction. The person doesn't have to meet the needs of the chatbot or compromise for the chatbot. And so you're the relationship expert, Yael, but I feel like there's so much risk here with this growing technology and use of AI in relationships.
100%. We are wired to find it appealing to have less friction. And that's why our consumer society really turns towards products and activities that make things feel easier, deliver everything to my door, make it, easy for me to figure out a problem, delegate, all those things. And it makes sense. But the reality in relationships and resilience in general is that we need to have those difficult experiences to learn, to grow, to develop depth, to understand what's important to us. And that's true as individuals, and it's 100% true in relationships. And so something that you're saying reminds me of this really awesome memoir that I read by Sherry Turkle, who's a professor at MIT. She was one of the pioneers in studying the relationship between people and technology. And her book, The Empathy Diaries, has this quote that I often think about in the context of these conversations about the importance of friction and how we relate to one another and how we relate to our technology. I'm just going to read this quote because I think it's very powerful. She writes, "Technology proposes a noble leap that will bond us so tightly to objects that we become as one with them. To resist that takes hard work. Because not only does technology offer the friction-free as where it wants to take us, but it makes the path to getting there the one of least resistance. But it's the other path that politics and human relationships have in common, the uncertain glory of a stumbling climb. It's not the world of the friction-free. It's the world of negotiating with people, unknown, disappointing, transcendent. It's ours. And she wrote this many years ago, but I think it's quite prescient in foretelling that we are so addicted to our devices because they make things feel easy. And that is a problem for our development as social creatures and as people who want to have depth and knowledge and fortitude. And so I think you're raising something that's so important. And in the context of mattering, that friction is really important.
Well, and that ties into the larger ideas you were discussing around social health. And we talk a lot about mental health, but I loved this connection with what is happening at a social level in terms of healthy and unhealthy, and the breakdown of networks and communities, and which lends the sense of belonging, which cultivates the mattering. So it is all so connected. And as a psychologist, I do struggle with placing diagnoses on the individual when the context matters so much. And I think this was an excellent way of thinking about the individual's health and well-being connected to mattering as dependent on the health of their social community. So I love that.
Yeah, it really is such a framework that brings with it the context. And that was one of my favorite parts about the book, the discussion about places, right? Because if we're all in our homes and we matter because somebody's going to text us a happy birthday or program it on their Facebook feed or whatever, it just has a hollow feeling to it. Whereas if we go in person and we have a hug and we look someone in the eyes and we have a deeper conversation that has some awkwardness that we work through together, that's where the depth comes. That's where friction really is rewarding. So I hope that people pick up the book. I hope people start to think more about the social context as you're raising and think about the value of friction.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. You can now listen to our podcast ad-free by becoming a supporter on Patreon. You can link to Patreon on our website or go to patreon.com/offtheclocksite.
If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review and sharing this episode with a friend or an enemy who would enjoy it.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our fabulous newsletter on Substack. Or if you're still addicted to social media, find us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
We'd like to thank our rockstar production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
Now for the boring part. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.